Hello everyone and welcome to the wine list tasting. So tonight we're going to be tasting our December boxes. So the wines that we have, which hopefully you have as well, are our Trebbiano Toscano, and we have our Samuel, a lovely Spanish red wine. So I'm Isabelle and basically I'm just going to talk you through both of our wines tonight, and we're going to start with our, I was going to say white then. We're going to start with our non-red wine and then we will move on to our red wine after that. So what we're going to do is we'll break our wines down. So we'll use our tasting cards and we'll break our wines down in the tasting card. We'll get our head around what's going on inside the wine, what we like about it. And then you can figure out what you like inside it, what you don't like inside it. And that means that you know what wines you're looking for in the future. You know what wines you want to go for, and you're learning about what you don't like, so you don't have to have that again, which is always the nicest point. So you could see on your screens you should have a little sort of comment box, so you can all comment inside that, and you can all say hello to me, and you can all tell me if you can hear me okay as well, which is probably the most important thing. So you can all join in with any questions. Let me know what you're tasting, what you're thinking about the wine as well. So we will, if you want to pour out your first wine, so we'll start with that Trebbiano, and if you want to pour it out now, well, when we pour it, what you want to do is pour it into your glass, but if you have a glass sort of this shape, you want to pour it to just about the widest point. Glassware is so important when you're drinking wine. I opened this wine, I tested them this morning. Very early this morning, and I had it in rubbish glassware, and you know what, it was really, really hard to sort of smell all the wonderful things that's going on inside it. Having good glassware, it makes a wine even better. I'd much rather have a rubbish wine in a great glass rather than a great wine in a rubbish sort of mug, which we've all done, let's admit it. So if you want to pour your wine to the widest point here, and the reason why we do that is so you have the biggest surface area of wine touching air. So your wine's starting to breathe, the aromas are drifting up off the wine, and then our glass is tapered just going up to here so that all your aromas get trapped inside there. So when you go to smell your wine, you can smell all the lovely aromas trapped inside that glass. To help you a little bit more, what you can do is you can start swilling it around. So I don't think this should stain your carpets, you should be okay. Could stain your carpets actually. Let me know if it happens. I've never spilt an orange wine, so I'm not sure if it stains. So what you want to do, put it on a flat surface to help you swill. Hold it like a pen and draw little circles with it, like a pen, and it starts to swill it round. And the reason why we're doing this is it's letting more of the wine mix up with more of the air. You want loads of the aromas to come off the wine to breathe and sort of, it's been trapped inside this bottle for ages. You want to let it breathe, let it out, let it free. So now when you put your nose to the glass, all that inside of the glass has been coated with the aroma, with the smell of the wine, and all the aromas have sort of been mixed up in the air, so they're all drifting up inside there. So you should be able to smell it even more now. You can smell that loads. So as you'll notice on your tasting card, you have loads of information about the winemaker, our first impression, which is wow, which is probably the best first impression you can possibly have with a wine. Then you've got your food pairings, and this little bit here says serve your wine at 12 degrees to get the best you can out of it. So the reason why we're serving it at 12 degrees is when you keep your white wines in a fridge, usually you have it at sort of between 2 and 5 degrees in a fridge, which is really, really cold. So you want that to be between 7 and 12 degrees for a white wine. So I usually like to bring my wine out of the fridge. We can't all have sort of loads of different fridges at all different temperatures for every single type of wine. But most wine, your coldest you should have your white wine is 7 degrees, so a bit warmer than your fridge. And then if your wine is getting really full and it's getting big and there's some amazing things going on inside it, you want to take that all the way up to 12 degrees. So if your wine is perfectly at temperature, very well done. I salute you and applaud you at the same time. But if not, don't worry, because we've only poured a tiny bit in our glass. It means it's helping us with our tasting, with our aroma, but it also means you can warm it up quite quickly. So you can just put it in the palm of your hand, warm that wine up nicely, bring it up to 12 degrees, The warmer wine is, the more you can taste inside it, to an extent, until you get to about 23 degrees. Then that's too much. We'll talk about that with the red though. So the white wine that we have, this one is this lovely bottle that we have here. So it's Casale Trebbiano Toscano. So Toscano basically means it's from Tuscany. And Trebbiano is the grape variety. So Trebbiano, even though we don't really hear many Trebbiano wines around, if we go to the supermarket, we look at the shelves and you'll never really see a Trebbiano on the shelves there. But what happens is Trebbiano is one of the top 10 most grown grape in the world. The most grown grape varieties, so it's really up there. It's actually number 9, so it's only just top 10. But it's number 3 in Italy, so we'll go with that. Bronze in Italy, it's huge. Oh, Anne's in the comments saying, hello, hi Anne, lovely to see you. I hope you like this wine, it's amazing, I'm obsessed. So when you have Trebbiano, it goes in everything. There are so many wines you can find which are Trebbiano. Lots of sort of Italian table wines, always Trebbiano. And the reason is because it's a really high acidity, neutral grape. So it means it's a bit like it can be made a bit like a Pinot Grigio sometimes. It's neutral, it's high acidity, it's fresh. Everyone likes it. It's very easy. So it's one of those good table wines. Because it's high acidity, it means it goes really well with food. So all Trebbianos are great with food. Acidity cuts through food really nicely, especially when we're in the middle of winter and we're eating stodgy food and need something to sort of cut through. Another reason why Trebbiano is so popular is because they use it as well. Because it's so neutral, they use it as the grape to go in vinegar and in balsamic vinegar. So the balsamic vinegar, what you do is you take grapes. I mean, I've never made vinegar, but from a quick Google, you put grapes inside a barrel and it starts to really slowly ferment, and that's why you get that sweet, sticky balsamic. They also use Trebbiano in France, which is where it's really famous, and the name for it in France is Uni Blanc. So Uni Blanc it's grown everywhere. It's one of the most grown grapes in France. And the reason why we don't hear about that is because Uni Blanc is the grape variety that always goes into cognac and Armagnac. Because it's that lovely high acidity, it's neutral. When you're making cognac and Armagnac, those sort of brandies, you can age it really well. You can put it in loads of oak casks and age it for sort of 50 years and it still comes out amazing. So speaking of balsamic vinegar, the producer who makes this also uses his Trebbiano grapes to make his own balsamic vinegar. So you can get balsamic vinegar and the wine, whichever one you prefer on that day. So this one, as you know when you pour it out, will look very different. So the producer is Antonio Gigliolo and he's from Tuscany. So what I'll do is I'll show you a little map of where we're looking at. So we're in Italy, and as you can see, you've got Italy, it looks like the boot, as we all know. You've got Rome in the middle, and then Tuscany is up here, and Certaldo is where this wine is from, so just in the centre there. And Certaldo it's a medieval village. It's between Florence and Siena, beautiful little medieval village. And the winemaker, Antonio, his family have been making wine on this farm here since 1770, which is a really long time, a very long time. How on earth has one family kept this farm since 1770? That's incredible. And even on this farm, they think they've even been growing it even before 1770. So they found evidence on their vineyard of a sort of a watchtower going back to the year 1000, which is crazy. And they can still see the sort of the ancient 1,000-year-old walls down in the cellars there. So it's incredibly old, this farm. And now they make amazing grapes. So they've really modernised. And since 1980, they've been making organic and biodynamic wines, organic and biodynamic farming, but we'll go into that more in a bit. Now, we'll talk about what colour this wine is. So as you notice when you pour this wine, you can see that it is really bright orange. And this is an orange wine. So if you've heard about orange wines, Orange wines are really, really sort of fashionable at the moment. You're getting to hear a lot about them and they are amazing. So orange wine dates all the way back to, it's not a new trend, it dates all the way back to sort of 6,000 years ago in Georgia, where you were making those first wines. So back then, 6,000 years ago, before anything I can remember, sort of in school history, but back then they were pressing their grapes and they were burying them down inside the earth, inside these huge ceramic urns, which are called kevri. So that's where the first orange wines come from, but it's sort of having a resurgence at the moment. It never disappeared, but it's definitely having a renaissance of orange wines. More and more people are making them, and more people are drinking them or hearing about them and being desperate to try some of them. They're really hard to find sometimes, but I think they're amazing, especially at Christmas time. So, what is orange wine? We'll go down to the basics, but when you make a white wine, you take white grapes, you press them really, really lightly for their juices, but don't have any skin contact at all, so you just throw away the grape skins and you're left with a really lovely white wine. When you make red wine, you take red grapes, you press them for their juices, but then you give them as much skin contact as possible. You're squeezing out those skins, because from the skin you're getting body, tannin and colour. So those are the three things that make a red wine, body, tannin and colour. When you have, Louise is saying hi with Joan. Hi Louise and Joan, I hope you're enjoying your wines. I was going to say, actually, if you haven't had a sip of this yet, I'm really sorry, I will just let you have a sip. Please start already, we'll do our little taste later, don't worry. So when you make red wine, you've got the body, tannin and colour coming from those grape skins. When you make a rosé, you take red grapes, but you make it like a white wine, so you're pressing it really, really lightly for the juices, not letting it have any grape skin contact. And you get a lovely, like, light, delicate rosé. There's no body in it, there's no colour, there's no tannin. Really, really delicate and lovely. When you make an orange wine, you take white grapes and you press them for their juices and then really press them down into the skin, so you're getting as much skin contact as possible. And with that, you're smooshing it down, you're getting all the body, tannin and colour possible out of those white grapes, and that's why we have that lovely orange colour. And that's why when we break down our characteristics on our little sheet in a minute, you'll notice that there's a lot of sort of red wine things going on inside here. So that is orange wine. I did say I'll tell you a bit about the organic and biodynamics part of this vineyard, the winery. So organic basically means you can have an organic wine without it being biodynamic, but you can't have a biodynamic wine without it being organic. Organic basically means it's like in most farming and most food, they don't use pesticides, they don't use any chemical sprays, they keep it all natural products. And you can get sort of organic bread, you can get organic eggs, lots of different organic foods. So yeah, that's organic. Biodynamic is when you are organic, so you're not using chemical sprays, you're not using any pesticides, but you're taking it a level further than that. So this is when you start to have different things going on. You're doing more sort of organic things in the vineyard. It was basically, biodynamic farming was invented by a man called Rudolf Steiner in 1924, and he was basically, I mean, when I researched him, he wasn't really a farmer. He was a philosopher, he was a clairvoyant and an architect. So not seeing where the farming is coming in, but he developed this incredible method, and it basically, biodynamic farming follows the lunar cycle. So you're following astrological alignments, and it basically means you follow a moon calendar for when you plant things, for when you trim your vineyards and bushes, for when you sort of fertilise. Every single thing that you do is dictated by the lunar calendar. You also, there's a few extra things. You can do absolutely all of them, or you can just do a certain number of them, and then you can be certified biodynamic. So some of them are different, but one of the main ones is taking cow manure, burying it, stuffing a cow horn with cow manure, and then burying the cow horns inside the earth, underground in your vineyard in winter, and then using those as fertiliser throughout the vineyard in summer. So it's meant to be really good for the sort of biodiversity, the natural biodiversity of the vineyard. You can also take it one further, and instead of using tractors, because they really compact the soil, squash the soil down, which isn't great for the soil because it means your rainwater can't trickle through, so your soil might be drier. It also means earthworms won't survive, so they can't dig down and make the soil even better and sort of make the soil more fertile. So you can use horses instead of that, and the horses will drive the sort of, they'll bring the machines in and bring all the tools and everything you need, toil the soil. So you can have horses, they're much lighter on the feet, they're much nicer. So that's sort of biodynamic. And they have found that with blind tastings, you can often see the difference between biodynamic and non-biodynamic wines. Not always, but they have done many blind tastings where they found that the biodynamic wines have shown what we call terroir. And terroir is basically a French word that means the wine tastes like where it's come from. It tastes like that exact hillside with that soil and that sunshine. And it really sort of shone through with its own colours. Oh, that sounds so poetic and lovely. So, what's everyone saying? So Adam and Karina are already drinking it. Great. Newland Archer loves cognac. So do I, it's amazing. And you can almost taste it in the glass. Possibly for different reasons. No, it'll still come with a great variety. We'll chat about aromas. And Anne is getting the elements of balsamic. Very, very confusing with tannin and white wine. We'll call it white wine. This is why we call it orange wine, because it's so completely different to what we're used to with white wine. So we'll give it its own category. So, shall we start breaking this wine down with our little tasting cards that we have? I have written, you can probably see my notes in here, I've written so many flavours underneath, so we'll get to aromas in a minute. But we'll start with our characteristics at the top. So, the first one is colour. It's on the very top left-hand side. And colour, it's bright orange. So do you think it's light or intense? You can put in the comments, but I don't think we even need to question it. It's orange, it's luminous, it looks like honey. It's so far past intense, it's absolutely wonderful. But can you see the colour of this? Bright, bright orange, it's absolutely wonderful. It's amber in colour. So usually when I talk about white wines, you talk about if it's light or if it's intense. I always say a light one is a bit like an easy Pinot Grigio when they're watery in colour and really, really light, tiny bit of pale yellow. And then when I say intense, I say amber. And I don't think you can get more amber than this one. It's luminescent, almost like a highlighter pen. So I think we know that it's very intense on this one. I think the way to describe the colour, you can sort of say honey, rust, it looks like a really rusty nail. But yeah, pure honey, copper almost. It's wonderful and a bit golden as well. It's such a lovely warm colour. So the next one that we'll talk about is tannins. And as we said, when you're making an orange wine, you're taking your white grapes, but you're pressing them for all the goodness that you can get out of the grape skin. So you're getting body, you're getting colour, and you're getting tannin. So we've already said we've got colour, but we should be looking for a tannin inside this wine. So if you take a sip of it now, tannin is the sort of the sensation when a wine is drying your mouth out a bit. We usually only get it in red wine. We also get it in orange wine. And tannin is when you can feel it on the sides of your mouth, you can feel it on the top of your tongue. If it's low tannin, it means your wine will feel silky and smooth. And if it's high tannin, it'll feel like ripped paper or like the Sahara Desert inside your mouth. So whereabouts do you think this one is when you're sipping it? I know it's very, very confusing because it's white wine, but it's not white wine. So feel free to... Scott Ganson just said it's the colour of iron brew. It is. You're not wrong, Scott. You're not wrong. And Beth said it as well. So iron brew. I wish that instead of saying light or intense on this, I wish it said light or iron brew. That's probably the best scale to have. But yeah, definitely iron brew intense. So, where do you think the tannins are in this one? Does it feel silky? Is it slipping down? Or is there something there? Is it sort of drying your mouth out a little bit? When we talk about tannins in food, tannins go amazingly well with food, and it's because if you've got juicy, succulent food, tannins will just cut through that because that juicy, so any sort of like fatty cheese, oily meat, oily vegetables, tannin will just completely cut through that with its drying acidity. So it makes it's just a perfect balance basically. If you're unsure about this wine at the moment, maybe have it with some food. Definitely have it with food. We'll chat all about the food pairings because I am obsessed with food. But Bartholomew is saying it's very high tannin. Medium plus tannin from Anne. Okay. I feel like we're all in the same boat then. We're not saying it's silky. We're saying it's definitely going further than silky. You can feel that dry sort of sensation in your mouth. It's always, you always have to think about the parameters when you're thinking about where to put it on the scale. So if we think about our lowest one is no tannin. That's normal white wine. And if we think about our highest tannin, imagine those really big sort of northern Italian red wines. When it's drying your mouth out, it's almost a punch in the face. This one's not quite there yet, but it's definitely on the way. So I would say medium and a little millimetre up from there. But yeah, it's definitely a lot more tannin than a normal white wine. But what we can measure now is acidity. So as we know, Trebbiano Uni Blanc as a grape variety has a lot of acidity normally, but because we're making it into an orange wine, we're giving it lots of barrel aging. It's a 2017, so it's had loads of aging. It's mustering up all these weird and wonderful sensations, aromas, textures. So does it still have that acidity? What you can do is, actually, because I can't see you, usually on Zoom I can see you, so I usually tell you to do it the way where you take a sip, swallow it, and then close your mouth and tilt your head forward and count how many seconds it takes for your mouth to really start watering. But because I can't see any of you, you can all do this. You can do what we call the dribble test, which is where you do exactly that. So you take a sip, swallow it, but then instead of closing your mouth, you just leave your mouth open like that. And you count how many seconds it takes until you have to shut your mouth before you start dribbling on yourself. None of you are on camera, so you can definitely do that, no problem. Do you think it's high acidity then, or do you think it's low acidity? Low acidity is when it's taking sort of 6 seconds and nothing is really watering, and when it does start to water, your mouth's not watering that much. That's things like a Viognier, lovely low acidity. When you have high acidity, that's something like a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, when you just think about them and just the memory alone starts to make your mouth water anyway because they're such high acidity. This one, I think it has a little pause and then your mouth starts to water loads. And it's just those sort of 2 seconds that's happening. We're just getting comments saying saliva. Yeah, it's bare saliva. But it's that slight pause before all that saliva, which means that it's not quite the highest on acidity yet. So we're just going a little bit in from that. And again, we're about halfway, plus about a millimetre. So as you'll notice, we said halfway plus about a millimetre on, you don't have to do it millimetre correct, don't worry. But we did the same on tannins and we did the same on acidity as well. And I really like wines that are sort of on the same level with tannin and acidity. It basically means tannin is drying your mouth out and acidity is making your mouth water. So if they're just nicely balanced and you can't tell where one starts and the other one stops, it means that it's a really nicely balanced wine. It means it's really easy drinking. You can just sit there and sip away. Usually when that balance is slightly off, if it's a bit higher acidity but it still feels nice and balanced, it just means it's more refreshing. It's more of an afternoon wine. If your tannins are a little bit higher, but it still feels balanced, it means that it's just one of those wines you have to have with food. Food softens out those tannins. They're that perfect combination that's going on. So we'll talk about sweetness in this one. But when we say sweetness, we basically mean how much sugar is in the wine. So you can do sweetness scientifically, which is based on how many milligrams of sugar per litre are actually in the wine. And in this one, there's actually none. Very, very, very low sugar levels. And what happens when you make wine, the little chemistry science part, is you have a fermentation of your grape juice, and the yeast eats up sugar, creates alcohol and CO2, we'll forget that. But it's creating alcohol, and this bottle is 14%. It is such high alcohol. So definitely all those sugars have been eaten up and turned into alcohol, definitely. So Mark's saying high acidity, pretty strong tannins, and it makes for a punchy grown-up wine. I think it's a punchy grown-up wine. I love that. Oh, mouth puckering. I love that description. That's fantastic. I think this is such, I love this wine. We'll keep chatting about it, and then we'll decide at the end if we like it, if we don't. If you don't, honestly, I think you're mad, but that's up to you. So, sweetness, it's a dry wine. All that sugar has been converted into lots and lots of alcohol. 14% is huge, even for a red wine. That's still pretty big. When we look at body now, so body is a bit tricky to measure when you've got white wine and orange wine. It's really easy when you measure it in red wine because you can kind of just tell from looking at it, just from the colour. It's usually the biggest sort of clue. So when you're looking at body, imagine having 2 glasses of milk in front of you. So if one is skimmed milk and one is full fat milk, that is the difference between body and wine. Skimmed milk is clean, it cuts through it, so it's like water. Full fat milk is rich, rounded, sits heavy on your palate. Can you imagine the difference between those two? Huge, huge difference. I'm definitely a blue cap milk girl any day. So where do you think this sits on that milk scale? Do you think it feels like skimmed milk? Do you think it feels like full fat milk? What does it feel like in your mouth? Let's have another sip. Oh, cheers everyone. Sorry, this is my first sip of... It's not my first sip of the day, don't worry. I think it's definitely got body, definitely quite a lot of body. Not quite full fat milk, but a bit past semi-skimmed milk. It feels rich, rounded, full. It's definitely sitting really heavy on your tongue. But you can go really far with full-bodied wines. You can go sort of... The most famous example is when you take a Chardonnay in Burgundy and you give it loads of oak aging, and it's getting really, really full and round, and it feels like pure cream, like Jersey cow milk. This one's sort of, I'd say it's 3/4 of the way up the scale. Definitely feels really, really nice and full. Ooh, that's wonderful. The reason it's having that full body, it's getting the body from that skin contact. And it's getting the body from aging inside an oak barrel. It's aging inside an old oak barrel, which means that you're getting the texture of a barrel, you're getting that body, but you're not getting too much oak flavour. So when you get a new oak barrel, it means that you get full-on vanilla, coconut. So we're not getting that yet. They're just sort of, they're being a bit more subtle than that. So everyone's enjoying it. Lovely. Even dogs are enjoying this wine. Lovely, as long as they're over 18, that's fine. Skimmed milk from Waitrose. I would not get milk from Aldi. I don't. Oh, semi-skimmed. Okay, semi-skimmed. Yeah, Waitrose, not Aldi though. Okay. More of a Sainsbury's person, but it's up to you where you get your milk from. So we can all agree, semi-skimmed plus a tiny little bit, sort of within that sort of. Yeah, definitely not full. You can go a bit more. And then finish on this wine. So finish, the ways that we measure quality of wine, one was balance, and we noticed that all our characteristics were balancing up very, very nicely there. None of them seemed way out. So we've got one quality of wine, tick. The second one is finish. And finish is when you have a sip of wine, swallow it, and then again count how many seconds, but this time how long you can really taste that flavour for on your palate. Can you taste it on your tongue still? How long is that flavour going on for? The longer it goes, the better it is. So if you're sort of 2 seconds and then it just dissipates, the flavour goes, it means it's a bit of a rubbish wine, I won't lie. If it's 5 seconds, it's quite nice then. It's getting a bit of interest behind it. 7 is really good, and 10 is amazing. Where do you think this is? When I did mine, I would say it's very hard to measure seconds the more wine you've drunk. So if you want to get a clock with second hands in front of you, that does make it slightly easier, because otherwise you can start going really, really slowly by accident. But I got to about 7 on this one. Really, really nice length in it. It's just staying around a long time, and it means that it's a good food wine, because that flavour is staying with you. As you're eating food, it's perfect. I tried this wine with every single thing that I ate today, all for you as a test. It goes very well with chicken soup. It goes, I feel like you're going to hear everything I eat today. It goes very well with chicken soup, it goes very well with cauliflower cheese, it goes very well with steak, really nice with steak, because you've got that tannin inside it. Tannin in steak is amazing, tannin in cheese is amazing. And it went really nice with a little fruitcake and some cheddar. I know fruitcake and cheddar is a bit of a weird combination, but this wine with fruitcake and cheddar was amazing. And you'll see why, because we'll go through our aromas now. So Anne agrees with the sort of 6-7 seconds. Nice length of time, this one. So what aromas are you getting inside this wine? On the left, you've got mainly sort of fruit, naturally occurring aromas. All your wines will have something from the circle on the left. On the right are the weird aromas. That's where it gets more bizarre. But those are, not all wines have those. These are what we call the complex flavours. And when we were measuring quality of wine, balance, yeah, finish, yeah, and complexity, and that's basically, does it have anything from this circle? The fourth one that we measure is depth of flavour, and that basically means if you can only pick sort of 3 flavours and write those down, it's not got much depth. But the more you can start writing down, it means the more depth that wine has. You can keep coming back to that wine and smelling even more things. So, shout out, what can you smell? We'll start with the sort of the main ones. Oh, Ben's having it with cheese. Very nice with cheese. It's all that tannin inside it. And the acidity pairing up nicely, that balance. So the first thing I could smell when I had this wine, I think it is a bit of a clue, because it looks like it, so it makes your brain immediately think you're just drinking that in liquid form. But marmalade, it looks like liquid marmalade. It looks like you're drinking marmalade, and it smells like it too. Oh, Anne's just said exactly the same, mandarin, but because of the colour. I thought exactly the same. I looked at the colour, and it makes your brain start searching for things that look orange coloured that could smell the same. But you can smell those inside it. Every single orange wine that I've ever had always smells of marmalade. But I love marmalade, so that's okay. And I love orange wine. So marmalade, orange, like a fresh orange, and also orange peel. Both of them at the same time. It's like the fresh orange is the sort of citrusy side of it, and the orange peel is that really sort of earthy, low tannin side of it. What else can you get? Have a big swill around, warm it up in the palm of your hand, and then breathe it in. Not like a sniff, like you've got a cold. Breathe it. Helps you a little bit more. So I've also put green apple. I'm starting with the fruit ones. I'll let you put the weird ones in the comments. Apple, lemon, orange peel, white peaches, specifically white for some reason. They smell completely different to me. But yeah, white peaches when they're really sort of tropical and zesty and flavoursome and sweet. I've also put apricot, and that's exactly what Ben's put as well. Dried fruit, candied fruit and orange. Louise got 7 to 9 seconds, nice. So, and she had it with steak. It was really good with steak. Please have it. If you have any left after this evening, please have it with steak. Steak's quite big if you're having it on Christmas Eve. That's quite a big thing to do. So, as you said, dried fruit. And when I said apricot on this one, dried apricot, candied fruit. And when I had it with my fruitcake earlier, with some cheddar, fruitcake and cheddar, and this wine, amazing, because it tastes like dried apricots. It tastes like sultanas nearly. And Christmas cake. And that acidity is working with all that fruit flavour. Even though the cake is sweet, there's so many sort of ripe fruit flavours going on inside here that it works. It's not like it's a sweet thing and a dry thing and it clashes. It just goes together really well, which you don't often get with wines. It's such a good wine to go with any food. I always say orange wine is one of those ones that's a little bit tricky if you're trying to drink a lot of wines and you're trying to have a lot of glasses on an afternoon. It's not an easy drink, but it's definitely one of those ones you can really sort of settle down to inside a big glass with, I was going to say a big meal, with lots of meals like I've had today. So what else is everyone getting? I've put, this is a bit odd, I've put wax. But can you get that sort of waxiness? It smells a bit like a candle, really waxy candle. And also honey as well. I know it looks like honey, but you're getting that sweet, ripe fruits flavour coming out of it. Tuscany is a really hot region. It's going to make wines that smell of really wonderful ripe fruits, lots of peaches, apricots, honey. It'll be wonderful. Then it's sort of lightened up by a bit of elderflower, a sort of white flower, just a little bit of floral note, just to sort of lift it. So many things going on inside it. Louise has put apple as well, yes. And then orange peel, dried apricot. Does anybody get a little bit of what we refer to as minerality? So minerality is in the second circle. So the second circle is when it's getting complex. So we've got sort of, it's not in here, but you can always add extra flavours to the circle. But we're adding to the second circle wax, honey, and minerality. So it's less when you smell it, but more when you taste it. It's a bit like a seashell. I know that sounds a bit odd, but a bit like a seashell, a bit sort of stony, flinty, and you usually get minerality coming from the soil variety. So whatever soils are growing underneath, the grapes sort of soak up a little bit of that flavour. Michael is doing this as their housemate's tier 4 30th birthday. Oh, happy birthday, Ruth! I hope you're having a lovely birthday, and I hope that they let you drink all of the wines and that they just let you keep the rest of the bottle, because this one's really nice. I hope you're liking it. But yeah, people are agreeing. So stone-like, wet stone, yes. And that's coming from the acidity, it's coming from the soils, it's feeling really fresh. Wet stones after the rain. Yeah. They've bottled that smell as a perfume because people like that smell so much. But yeah, it's definitely in there. It's wonderful. So what you can do is, if you're enjoying it, you can put your verdict, and then we'll start to collect our little verdicts. So mine is here. Can you see that? Smiley face. Really smiley face. I've had some orange wines which I've really not enjoyed, but again, it's sort of time and place. If it's a summer afternoon and you just want a refreshing drink, you're not going to enjoy an orange wine, but right now, with all sort of Christmas foods, it's amazing. So, shall we move on to our next wine? Shall we go for the Samuel? So the Samuel is a Spanish red wine. It's 100% Grenache, and you can actually see how much we've taken out of this bottle already, because it is wonderful. I have to say, there's 4 in my household, so it wasn't just me. It's very nice with steak as well as the orange wine. So Samuel, the first thing when you pour it out, if we put it into our glasses, pour it to the widest point again, swill it around in your glass. If you do want to save up on washing, especially for those whose 30th birthday it is, you don't want to have any washing up, you can use the same glass. Whenever we do tastings, we start with a lighter wine and move on to the heavier wine, which means that your palate can adjust well that way. You don't want to start heavier and move lighter. And not just your palate, it means your glass will be fine with that as well. So you don't have to change your glass, you don't even have to rinse it. If you're going from red to a sort of white wine, then you'll want to rinse it, but this way is fine. So, Bartholomew didn't like the orange wine when he first had it, but I always think this, when you break it down with your characteristics here, you can have your first sip and think, I don't know what's going on. And when you get your head around it and break down all the elements inside it, you can really start to figure out what you like in it, what you don't like inside it. Makes it much easier. So, the next wine, the first thing that you notice, shall we do a little cheers? Shall we all have our first sip? Cheers, everyone. Yeah. The first thing you'll notice on this one is how high alcohol this is. This wine is really high alcohol. If you look on the back, I know the last one we had was 14%, which was huge, but this one is 15.3%. It is an enormous wine. 15.3% is most than sort of any wine you'll see in most shops. They have to be careful when they get to sort of that side of the scale, because it makes you get very drunk very quickly. So, excuse me, I'm coughing. That's all of the high alcohol. So, the reason why some wines are really high alcohol, especially these days, wines are getting higher and higher alcohol. And it's because in a lot of wine growing regions, many wine growing regions, the climate is getting slightly hotter. And when you have a really hot vineyard, it means that you are getting, the sun is really hot and it's making the grape create more sugar as it's growing. The more sugar you have inside your grape, as we know from our chemistry lesson earlier, you have in your fermentation, yeast eats up sugar to create alcohol. So the more sugar you have, the more alcohol you're going to have. So it means it's going to be from a really hot vineyard, this wine. Winemakers really struggle with high alcohol wines at the moment, because if your wine is too high alcohol, it can feel really flat and it feels claggy and cloying and not very nice. So you need good acidity to sort of balance this out. Ooh, clues for later. So this wine is called Samuel and it's from the loveliest producer. So shall I show you a little map again? We are over in Spain this time. And we're in the north of Spain. So up here it's Aragon, but it's directly on the border with Catalonia. So they speak Catalan. They're a very lovely producer, a tiny little producer. If you want to follow them on Instagram, I keep messaging them on Instagram at the moment because I just think they're the loveliest people. And they're called Sifer Wines. They've nearly got 1,000 followers and I just love them. They post all about their wines and they put it in English, Catalan and Spanish. So you can learn all of your languages at once. So when you are, Sifer Wines. So when you are in this area in Spain, northern Spain is still super hot. So the area around here, it's lots of rolling hills. The valleys are really fertile, but this is grown slightly further up the hill. It's really hot in summer, dry, arid summers. Grenache as a grape is perfect for that because it can survive drought. You see Grenache growing all over the world. It grows in Côte d'Aron, sort of our Châteauneuf de Pape. It grows in Provence, it grows in Spain. So where we are, I'll show you the map again. But as you can see, exactly where we are, it's halfway between, we'll sort of squash between, Priorat and Rioja. So those are two huge wine growing regions. And Priorat and Rioja both use Grenache grapes inside their blends sometimes to sort of add to it. Grenache is this amazing grape. You can change it and chop it and change it around, make it anything out of you want of it. But it creates really high alcohol wines when you're in a really hot climate. Everyone's loving it already. And thank you, Nick and Jess. I love you too. So when we look at this wine, the producers who are making it, they like to experiment a lot. So the first time that they did a wine like this was in 2018, and this is the 2019. So in 2018, what they did is they split their grapes in two, experimented, aged half of them in steel and half of them in old oak barrels. They don't like adding oak flavours. Like the last one we had, aged in old oak, which is when you're not adding that sort of really strong vanilla and coconut. That's not what they wanted inside their wine. So again, they're aging it in old barrels. So they split it halfway between steel and oak and they basically experimented. They sort of did a lot of tastings and decided which was their favourite. And they loved the texture that they got out of old oak barrels. So they did that with this wine. Next year, they're aging it inside big ceramic urns, amphora, so that'll be really good. So when you're aging this wine, it's adding more texture. It's starting to muster up some really interesting flavours from being inside that oak. So we'll see a few of these. And what they do as well, not only do they experiment with sort of different ways that they can age their wine, but they like to experiment with how people perceive their wines. So what they do is they choose to have monovarietal wines. And monovarietal basically means it's just one grape variety. It's 100% Grenache. And they like to choose this because they like to show people what that one grape can do. And it's a really, really good way of learning about wines. If you have a lot of blends, it's quite tricky to figure out what is going on inside that wine. What is each part of the blend adding to it? It tastes great, but why? This is such a great way to figure out Grenache and how wonderful Grenache can be by itself. So when you're blending it in with all those other grape varieties inside Rhone Valley, you can figure out if you want a really high quantity of Grenache, because they're wonderful. So shall we start to break it down with this one? Everyone's absolutely loving it, and I'm really, really glad. That's why mine is down to here already, because it's wonderful. So, someone's just heard it tastes like a black cherry Muller yoghurt. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you've got it spot on. We don't even need this card now, it's done. So the colour on this one, what you can do is, I mean, the last one was luminous, so you could just lift the glass up, you could see it straight away. But to do it the proper way, we'll hold our white piece of paper and we'll hold our wine over the top and look over the glass. And by doing that, you're comparing the red to bright white, so you're getting the exact colour from this. What sort of colour is it? Can you see that? Light or intense? It is this really wonderful colour. It's sort of magenta, really sort of pinky, purpley, yeah, wonderful, magenta nearly. So I would say that is medium. I know it's really intense in colour, that really sort of bright magenta, but if you think about intensity with colour, it's probably medium and a bit then. But the light ones are when it's really post-box red and when you can kind of see through it. But the darker it gets, the more intense it colour it gets, and the more opaque it gets as well. So even though this one is getting quite opaque, if you compare it to something like a Tannat or a Malbec, and they're really sort of dark in colour, this one's not quite there yet. Still lovely and intense, but not all the way up the scale yet. So we can measure tannin again on this one. And we can measure tannin in comparison to that orange wine we just had, which was medium and 1 millimetre. Do you think this one's a bit more tannin? Have a sip. How much is that drying the sides of your mouth out again? For mine, it's a lot. And everyone's saying it's one of those wines that you taste and you just go, wow. Wow on both of these wines today. That's amazing. So tannin on this one is huge. It's really, really drying, sides of your mouth out, top of your tongue, back of the tongue. Everything is having that really drying sensation. We're not on the highest yet. We're a tiny little bit in, but definitely 3/4 of the way up. This is a big wine. So this is one of those wines that's going to go really well with food. But as we know, we want it to be nice and balanced. So we've already got the high alcohol. We've got that pretty high tannin. We need high acidity in order for this wine to feel balanced. So where is the acidity on this? We sometimes forget that red wines have acidity and they need that for the balance. So if you have another sip again, tilt your head forward, do the dribble test. How much is your mouth watering? Is it watering lots? Mine's watering lots. Lots and lots. Almost, not quite straight away, but I think definitely faster than the last one. It's definitely making your mouth water much more. So I'd say this is going up to high, not quite high yet, but I've definitely 3/4, smidge more maybe. But that means we're lining it up really nicely with their tannins. So we've got 3/4 of the way on tannins, we've got 3/4 of the way on acidity, we've got about twice the way on alcohol. So it's feeling really nice and balanced now. That acidity is balancing it out. It's making it feel fresh, keeping it young and juicy still. So I think people are agreeing, yeah, 1 to 2 seconds and then your mouth starts to water. Pretty high acidity, that one. So, sweetness on this one. What do you think the sweetness is? Do you think it's dry or do you think it's sweet? Does your wine contain sugar? Or has all that sugar been converted into all the alcohol that you're getting out of your wine? Yes, definitely. I don't think you could get any more alcohol out of this wine. It must have eaten up all the sugar and transformed it into alcohol. So dry wine, but we're smelling lots of nice fruit flavours, so it can be a bit confusing. Body on this wine. So body, we can think about our milk again. We can also just look at it. You can usually tell from the colour. Not always, there's always exceptions. Well, everyone's saying dry, yes. But yeah, there's always exceptions, but usually with a red wine you can just look at it and tell the colour sort of straight away. Do we think this is skimmed milk? Do we think it's full fat milk? Do you think it's a semi-skimmed milk in between? And also you can think about everything else that's going on with it, the flavours, the alcohol, the tannin. They're all sort of adding up to it. And I think this is medium. There's so many things that make you want to say full, because all that flavour going on is getting a bit fuller and fuller. But you can take a red wine and make it go really, really full. So we're sort of still medium on this one. We're still getting a nice bit of body. Finish. Where do you think the finish is with this one? Do you think it's a short finish or do you think it's a long finish? How long is that flavour staying with you? So when I first tasted this, I had a sip. I started to count the seconds, but I was like, I can't really taste anything at first. It almost had a 2-second delay where it feels really fresh and light. And then the flavours start to build up. The flavours are developing on this one. Just as you take a sip, it starts off light and then it throws you in at the deep end. And it stays with you for a really long time. So I got to about 9-10 seconds on this one. It is hard to know when your wine stops because it doesn't just stop. It goes off, tails off really gradually. So you've got to pick a point somewhere on it. But I've gone with 9. Yeah, people are agreeing. So yeah, medium body, absolutely. And do you agree with finish? Do you think this is pretty long finish on this one? Yeah. So I think when we're measuring quality wine again, we've got our balance nicely. We've got our finish, definitely very nicely. Really, really long finish. I can almost still taste it from this afternoon. And then where do you think, shall we look at aromas? Do we get those next two sort of notes of quality when you get the complexity and the depth? But yeah, 8 to 9 seconds, long time. I did realise actually we have given you 2 wines this December for your December box, and they are both really high alcohol. It's almost like we all needed the high alcohol wines this December. 14% and 15.5%. Make sure you have a glass of water tonight, that's all I'll say. So, aromas. Where are your aromas? We can start with the first circle with the fruit. So what fruit are you getting off this? I think swill it around in the glass again. Definitely cherry. Loads and loads of cherry. And just all the cherries, red cherry, black cherry, candied cherry, nearly. Full of cherry. And blueberry and blackberries and blackcurrant and red currant. You can just name so many sort of black and red fruits in this one, and they're all there. Oh, that is wonderful. And it's so intense as well. So when you're thinking about the concentration of these grapes here, they have really rubbish soils in their vineyard. It's all sand and silt soils, and it means that those soils, the grape can't really survive that well there. So what the vine does, it's actually a very clever technique. What the vine does is it sends out an alert signal. So this vine, this living thing, is basically saying, I can't survive here. I may not last much longer, but vines have that same sort of animal need to sort of survive and have little vine babies and let their vine babies survive somewhere. So it sends out an alert signal, and it basically makes their grapes so juicy. Doesn't make many grapes, but it concentrates it down and makes those grapes so juicy and delicious that some sort of animal or human being will taste that grape, think, wow, that's really delicious, take a few grapes, and then go leave those seeds, spit the seeds out somewhere else where it's much better quality of soil. So this vine is basically saying, here, take my babies and go plant them somewhere with better soils where they can really survive and thrive, and we can carry on as a great vine variety. And that's what's happening here. So it's creating really concentrated, juicy fruits, giving us all these things that everyone's saying: blueberry, cherry, summer pudding, plum, definitely, all these flavours. And it's really concentrated because it's such rubbish soil. Not all grapes can do that. Only the really sort of hardy grapes. If you try to do that with Pinot Noir, it'd have a hissy fit. It'd be a nightmare. So, we're saying yeast as well. A little bit of toastiness, do you think? So this wine, because, very clever of you, because it has been aged in old oak barrels, when you have old oak barrels, you get a bit of toastiness. And I'm definitely getting a bit of toastiness inside here. You also get, what other people have said, a tiny bit of vanilla, but really, really subtle vanilla, because it's an old oak barrel. If you had the brand new barrel, it'd be huge vanilla, but it's an old barrel, so it's just a tiny, tiny hint of vanilla. I've also put smoke, which is similar to toast. It's that sort of cross between yeast and smoke. You get toast. So toast, yeast, smoke, a creaminess. Yeah, definitely a creaminess. And I've also put this really sort of herbaceous element that you're getting behind it. So it's a bit of thyme, bay leaves. Sort of when you open your spice cupboard and look at all the green things, it smells like that. Can everyone smell that inside it? It's all those really juicy, sugary berries. And then this whole other side to it. So our orange wine was these really intense flavours that were sort of lifted up by that floral note. And this wine is really intense, but being lifted up by that herbaceous note. Both of these winemakers, I'm obsessed with them. This is amazing. Any more flavours that you're getting? I put caramel, but now I'm going back to it. Maybe slightly caramel, but it's more sort of vanilla-y. Vanilla cream rather than caramel. I feel like they're two different things, similar but different. But yeah, vanilla pod in a pie. Yeah. And again, it's that vanilla and cream and yeast all being mixed together. And that's how you make a pie, everyone. That's my recipe. So, we're getting a lot of flavours. So when we're talking about our balance, we've got our balance. We have our nice finish. Very nice finish on this one. I went fully all the way. We have our complexity. We're getting things from that second circle. And we've talked about a lot of flavours. So we're getting our depth of flavour. We're having a lot going on. So what's everyone's verdict? Do you like the wine? I'll keep mine a secret until I say it, because you might think that I hate this wine the way I've talked about it. So this is a huge smiley face again, because that's wonderful. So Nick and Jess have said licorice and chocolate and cherry. I get what you mean with the licorice. It's that sort of, that bit of spice again. When I was talking about the bay leaves and licorice both have a bit of a herbaceous but spicy as well. Spicy. So let me know if you like this wine. It is wonderful. So when you're having it with food pairings, again, very similar to that orange wine, because we have that lovely body going on, because we have all those tannins as well. This wine is really, and the acidity, this wine is really good with food, so it'll go well with any sort of cheeses. You've got the tannin, you've got the acidity, you've got the creaminess going on inside it. Then it'll go really well with steaks. So either the orange wine or the red wine will go really well with that. And so anything basically fatty, oily, so things like vegetables roasted in lots of olive oil, perfect. Oh, we have some wonderful comments coming about this wine. We've got bouquet garni, love it, and one word, j'adore. I feel like there's a bit of a French theme going on with everyone loving this wine. Wonderful. Guys, it's a Spanish wine, but okay. Am I able to explain the legs on the wine? Absolutely. So, legs is one of those things where people sort of swirl the glass around and you look at where the legs are running down. But people always talk about it, but it's not actually that reliable a thing to sort of talk about with wine, so we tend to ignore it. Legs is basically, it's viscosity on wine. So viscosity is oiliness. It can tell you about the sort of the oiliness in the wine, the concentration, and mainly the alcohol. But it's a very unreliable thing to talk about, because scientifically, when you break down what legs actually are, It is surface tension of wine on the glass. So it's surface tension of alcohol and the rate that that alcohol is evaporating into the air. So this is really heavily reliant on temperature of the room that you're in, temperature of your glassware. So we tend to forget about legs because there's so many other ways that you can measure all your wine, which is what we've done this evening. So you can rely on other techniques rather than relying on your temperature and your glassware being perfect sort of consistency between all your wines that you'll ever drink in your life. So the best way to actually measure, we've measured lots of different things, but the best way to measure the alcohol, which is the main thing, is when you, this is perfect for it, when you have the little burn in your throat here, when you drink whiskey. The alcohol, that's the alcohol, and that's how to measure the alcohol in your wine. So if you take a sip, especially of that red wine now, you'll notice a little burn going on in the bottom of your throat just here. And the higher that burn, it means the higher the alcohol is going to be. So when you do your official wine exams, you have to do a blind tasting and you have to write down exactly what the alcohol percentage is going to be on that wine. So with this one, you'll notice your throat is burning quite a bit more than most of them. And it means that really high alcohol, you're getting that lovely burn, so you can write down a big 15.3. Don't think I'd ever write 15.3 because I would never imagine that one would be that extreme. So we've got a question, where do the wine lists discover these wines? Josh basically finds all the wines. He drinks a lot of them to test them all out, all for you, so that you can find the best ones. We get so many that aren't as nice. We just pick out our favourite ones from lots of different sources, lots of different winemakers all over the world, and we always try to go for really, really small producers who are doing an amazing job but aren't really that well known. So we want to use their wines, spread the word, tell people about them because they're so amazing. Like this producer, they've only got 900 followers. Actually, I think if 9 of you followed them, Sifer Wines, then they'll have 1,000. They'll be really happy. I'll give them a message. Anne says this is the best red wine we have ever had. Wonderful. I know that Anne really likes the white wines that we send them. I think it's the Eau de Blanc. That's your favourite. Mine too. But we basically we knew that December's a special time, so we basically tried to save some really great bottles that we found this year for you to have in December because they're so wonderful. So we saved them because they're really high alcohol and they're going to get you really drunk, and also because they're so wonderful with Christmas foods with lots of cheese boards. So it's perfect. And I've also asked, do the wine lists prefer low intervention wines when sourcing? Ooh, that's a good question. I really like low intervention wines because it does show, like the wines we've had, they feel like they come from the region. It's not like when you have a sausage factory and all the wines are just you're tinkering with them so much that they all just taste the same. They could be from anywhere. When you have low intervention, it really shows where the wine's coming from. And because we want to help everyone and help ourselves learn about loads of different wines everywhere, it's really good to go low intervention when you want to learn, because that means you can say, that is what a wine is like from northern Spain. Hot climate, high alcohol, big and round. Wonderful. Oh, everyone loves the ode. Yeah, me too. Oh, loads of smiley faces. Amazing. Well, I was going to say, what's everyone's favourite wine between the two? If you can pick one, let me know in the comments. But I was going to say, thank you ever so much for doing a tasting with us. I really hope you enjoy your December boxes. I hope that these wines last a few more days for you so you can really make the most of having them with all the wonderful food pairings that we talked about, because they're all amazing. But thank you ever so much. I hope you're all looking after yourselves. Have a lovely Christmas. Have a lovely time, but let us know in the comments about your wines. Let us know on Instagram which one's been your favourite of the year, because I'm really desperate to know. Tell me everything. But thank you everyone for coming tonight. It was lovely to meet you all. But have a wonderful Christmas and take care. I will see you all again very soon. Goodbye everyone. Merry Christmas.